Wow.
Hi.
Hi.
So Dawn and I have been Zooming and talking on the phone and emailing, and we've had this whole robust relationship. We didn't meet in person until today.
I know, yay, it's finally happened.
I know. There might have been some teary eyes on
Yeah,
it.
just a little bit.
So since your book comes out tomorrow, a lot of people haven't had the chance to read it yet. So maybe we could start off and you could just tell us briefly what it's about.
Yeah, that's like the trickiest question first, isn't it, really? So, Sedating Elaine is about a slightly troubled woman called Frances, who has a debt with a drug dealer that she needs to pay off. So her clever idea is to invite her girlfriend to move in with her, even though she is clingy and needy and Frances already can't stand her. Once she moves in, she becomes this kind of permanently horny creature who won't leave her alone and is kind of pestering her all the time. So she decides, well, what can you do? I guess I'm just going to have to sedate her because you still need to get the money for the drug dealer. So yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
And that's the book. I know. It sounds really crazy when I say it out loud, but it seemed perfectly normal when I was writing it.
When you're writing it, yeah. I mean, it begs the question, what made you think of this? Where did it come from?
I know, it's worrying, isn't it?
It is.
Well, one of my friends was going through a breakup, and I decided to write something to cheer her up, just something that was a bit jokey. I was actually writing something else at the time. I was writing this book for 2.5 years, which I had been working on really seriously, and I thought was a really good serious novel. And this was something I was just messing around with in the background and just didn't take seriously at all. Until a few chapters in, when I was really hating the book I'd now been writing for 2.5 years, my fiance was like, oh, just send that over to your agent, this thing that you're playing around with, and see what she makes of it. So that was what I did, and she said, just keep writing, and it was just like, bam, off we go. But really, it was just for a laugh. I just didn't think it was going to be taken seriously by anyone because it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, Elaine is wonderfully ridiculous. And so Dawn has the sensible attitude that if you're on stage reading from your own comic novel, it's embarrassing to sit up here and say, look how funny I am, ha ha ha. But I have no shame in telling you how very funny she is. And so I just want to read you this little sections just so that you can get an idea of the character Elaine. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about Elaine. So Frances, to get money for her drug dealer, has decided that she is going to ask her girlfriend, Elaine, to move in with her. She really doesn't want to be doing this. Elaine, she said, and prayed for a sudden miracle to intervene. It didn't. Would you like to move in with me? Elaine swallowed. Then, slowly, as if the question were gradually permeating the layers of her mind until, ping, making sense, her jaw dropped, eyes widened, brow lifted. She stayed a moment in this prolonged, gormless pose, then said, oh my God, are you serious? Handed a get out. The chance to pretend it was a joke, carry on as before, find some other solution. Frances said nothing, then heard her voice somberly reply, of course. 2 broken glasses and a squeal later, Frances found herself on the living room floor. Elaine had leapt from the bed and launched herself, as if falling downstairs, all arms and legs waving, out of bed and straight at Frances, whose smaller size and unpreparedness meant she was unable as ever to defend herself against the onslaught of a hyper Elaine. The nude body wriggled heavily on top of her as frantic pecking commenced. Her chin, her cheeks, her neck, her lips. Yes, 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 Elaine squeaked between kisses. Yes, 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 yes. This was worse than Frances had expected, and she had expected something ridiculous. Pinned beneath Elaine's behemoth weight, smothered by her girlfriend's strangely masculine bulk, now apparently cohabitating, she felt helpless. Her mind flashed back to many nature programs where a poor animal, an antelope or mouse or sparrow, would be caught and held for a few gratuitous moments before the jaws came in for the kill. Elaine reared up like a praying mantis. When shall I move in? Her voice sounded deeper than normal, as if she were slightly choking. Tears trembled in her eyes. When? Frances gasped for breath. As soon as possible, really, I suppose. And Elaine looked down upon her from way up there, the undersides of her breasts glistening moistly. Then she smiled and laughed and said, I love you, baby, before swooping down, open-mouthed, hungry again. So that's Elaine.
Yep, welcome to Elaine.
Elaine's a lot.
She is a lot. I really like Elaine. I have kind of a soft spot for her. I think that she's harmless and loving, and she clearly adores Francis. I mean, yeah, she's a lot to take, isn't she? But I don't know. What do you think? I just think she's...
I had a lot of sympathy for Elaine. I also think that her ability to read social cues is
a bit off.
Iffy.
Yeah.
Because she really seems to think that everything's going super.
Yeah, she does, doesn't she? Bless her.
Yeah. I guess I feel like in some ways this whole concept is very wild, but this is the relatable part, right? Like a relationship where one person feels more than the other. In this case, it's kind of a lot more. Were you thinking about it as sort of a relatable?
I think I assumed it must be relatable because it was relatable to me.
Yeah.
So it must be relatable to other people, right? Surely. It can't just be me. So yeah, I think I did. I think I just thought that it's more that Francis is quite a poor judgment of character as well. So what do you do if the people you think are the good guys turn out to be bad, and the people you think are the bad guys turn out to be good, which is more or less what happens with a lot of the people in the book for Francis, then how can she really judge what could possibly happen with Elaine? And Elaine's a lot to take then, but Elaine obviously gets worse over the next couple of chapters.
She does, but I think you're kind of hitting one of the big themes of the book, right? That she's a terrible judge of character, and that she's hoping that this is a rebound relationship, right?
This is a short-term fix. You know, she just needs to pay off this drug dealer, and then that's it. The relationship will be over. I think she only sees it as, yeah, Elaine will just be around in my life for like a couple of weeks or like a month or so, something like that. Elaine's not thinking like that.
And the whole reason that she brought Adrienne home, sorry that I just gave it away. The whole reason that she brought Elaine home in the first place is because of Adrienne. Do you want to tell us about Adrienne?
Well, Adrienne was the woman that she was madly in love with for some time, and they moved in together, and Francis felt like she had been completed by this person, and then she was abruptly dumped and left broken-hearted, and then went to have a lot of rebounds and just thought Elaine was going to be one of these rebounds.
What do you think of Adrienne?
I love to hate Adrienne. I do. Well, I kind of feel like most of the characters in the book are people that I've met somewhere in my life. And I can't quite pinpoint who Adrienne is, but I do feel like I know her quite well. I don't know, I don't know how to even describe her.
She's a narcissist, right?
She is a narcissist, and she's sexy, and she's wild, and she's crazy, and she's incredibly manipulative. And you don't really find out how bad she is until you're right at the end, when Francis finds out how bad she is,
yeah.
You know, and that she's been being played.
But it says so much about Francis that this person who loves her so much, Francis just finds repulsive, and the person who just like callously discards her, she pines away for, right?
Yeah, but then, I mean, I think that a lot of us have been there where we've been treated really badly by someone who has abruptly ended a relationship for no real reason,
yeah.
That you're left with a sense of yearning for that person. And then, you know, she rips herself out of Francis's life, she goes to the flat and she takes all of her stuff away, and Francis is just left there bereft with a space to fill.
Yeah. God, I wish I had dog-eared the scene, but there's this brutal scene where Adrienne's like, it was nothing you did that made me break up with you. It's just who you are. And you're like, that is so much worse. Like,
yeah, I know, right?
It's just who I am.
Well, then you would be grateful for an Elaine, wouldn't you, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, someone loves me.
Right, for who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just can't stand her.
So one of the things that entertains me so much is that I think that in some ways, to me, Adrienne is the true villain. I think she's the villain of the novel. Do you think she's the villain of the novel?
Yeah, she is.
So she's the villain of the novel, but hilariously, she's not actually the one trying to kill Francis. And so, it's sort of funny that.
But then I think that Frances is one of those people they're not a bad person, they're just doing a bad thing. Maybe you don't agree with that, maybe you think they're just awful.
I agree.
But yeah, I think that there are lots of people, I think, most people aren't good people or bad people, they sort of hover around in the middle and they do good things and bad things. And she's just that. She's a normal person who has had a lot of things happen that have made her quite broken and troubled. And this is her she's erring on the bad side in this book, but you can see that she's still a good person beneath that.
Do you know what's making me laugh right now is when I said that I wasn't actually even intending that Frances was the bad person, because in no way is she the bad person. I'm like, oh yeah. She's like possibly putting her girlfriend in a coma, but no, I don't mean her. I was thinking more about Dom, the drug dealer, as like the bad guy. So do you want to explain who Dom is?
Okay, so Dom is the drug dealer that she owes this £2,000 debt to. And he's kind of a weedy but very nice, kind of sulky kind of guy that she has known for a very long time, that she's actually quite friendly with. And I think he's just kind of quite a nice guy, isn't he, throughout most of the book. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, he shows sort of his true colours later on, doesn't he, when he turns out to be not so nice. But for the most part, yeah, you think kind of he's someone who is on her side in a way. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to embarrass you once again and just read a little scene about Dom, because I feel like this just explains the drug dealer character. Dom was the type of person who had never learned how to be friendly, but in spite of this had managed to cultivate a certain appeal. Not quite charm, more like when you pat your lap and a cat shuns you, making you want it even more. His name was connected to a myth, an urban legend. Apparently, he kept a huge collection of guns stored in an old wine cellar, laid down in rows and rows amongst a few hundred bottles of Dom Perignon. She didn't know his real name, and she'd never dare ask him if it were true. His eyes, though tight and low and almost always looking at the ground, lit like flares exploded behind them. She supposed he was handsome in a way, attracted as she was to the darker side of life, and she liked how when he smoked, he exhaled through his wide mouth and long nose simultaneously so that it engulfed him. It made him look like a young dragon still learning its dragony ways. She couldn't help wanting to be kidnapped or whisked away by someone like him. She could turn the bottles of champagne and live in the cellar like a little golem. It sounded quite peaceful. So she kind of really likes her drug dealer, even though he does go on to threaten her fairly specifically. At the beginning of the book, the action is kicked off by a threatening letter under his door, and then he goes on to really threaten her. But tell me why you made that decision that the main scary presence in the book was going to be someone who was maybe not super scary.
Yeah, because I think that if it was someone who was super scary, then it wouldn't be funny. It wouldn't be fun for me to write, and it wouldn't be funny to read. And I didn't want that for Frances, and that wasn't the aim of the book, to have some character that was going to be really, really awful, because the awful deed was being done by her.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a drug dealer, and he is kind of a bad guy towards the end a little bit, when he gets a bit more kind of intimidating and obviously introduces Betty into the scene. But yeah, for the most part, I just felt like I couldn't have him be some horrendous brute from the get-go. That would be awful for her.
Yeah.
Things are hard enough.
Yeah, but that's what you do for this whole book. Like, this whole entire book is a tightrope, and there's so many tightropes you're walking, right? Like, is Dom going to cause her bodily harm, or is he a nice guy? Like, is she going to accidentally kill her girlfriend, or is it all going to be okay? That's what this whole book is, right?
Yeah.
Was that hard to do, or was that something you were thinking hard about?
No, I mean, like I said, because the book came out so accidentally, there was no agenda with any of it at all. So I find questions like this, they kind of throw me, because it's like, oh, why did you think of this? And I was like, I don't know. Like,
it just happened.
I just sat down and I just wrote. It's just, I write what feels write, you know? And so I like try out different things with different characters and different scenes, and the thing that I get a hunch is the right thing, then I leave that in. So like you saying like, oh, this was a tightrope and stuff, it was like, yeah, at the time it just felt right to me, so that was just what I went with. But I wasn't thinking anything in particular I mean, so much of the book changed from the first draft anyway. It went off in so many different directions that I certainly wasn't thinking very clearly about how I was going to go. It had 6 different endings before I settled on that one, and it was just fun. Instead of writing all this serious stuff I'd written in the past, I just tapped into a place of play, and this apparently is what happens when I'm playful.
Yeah, but that actually is something I wanted to ask you about, because somebody wrote on Twitter that part of writing a novel is sustaining a vibe for 300 pages. And that's actually a really hard thing to do, you know? And I mean, humor, whatever the voice is. Did you do anything to help kind of keep the vibe of the book? Did you have a Post-it note? Did you have a mantra? Is there something you told yourself for, like, I don't know, I've heard of people who put a postcard up, like with an image.
No. The weird thing was that all the books I had written before, the books that were taking me 2 to 3 years to write, they were like getting blood out of a stone. They were really hard going. This one, because I'm just being myself, I mean, really, this is how I think and speak. And when I write my journal, this is how it is. Not the same content. That would be weird. But, you know, this is me. So it was the easiest thing to do. That's why the first draft of this came out in 6 weeks. Yeah. It was just so easy. And, you know, you don't have to remind yourself to be yourself. This whole thing has been a great big fat lesson in just be yourself.
Yeah. I think that's how it goes. I mean, I know that can't always be true, but so often as a reader, I think you can tell when the writer is having fun.
Yeah, I think that you must be able to. I mean, nothing that I wrote before had any comedy in it. It was all it was all dark, but without the comedy. It was Sedating Elaine with no humor. Yeah. And a lot of people wince when I say that. Ooh, yeah, I know. And then I wondered why everyone was saying that my stuff was too dark. So the comedy stuff was really like, well, this is how I joke around with my friends. Yeah. And especially joking, like make-believe stuff. So whenever I think up an idea for a story, it usually begins with something like, oh, imagine if such and such happened. So for Sedating Elaine, it was, oh, imagine if you were so heartbroken that you had to choose whether to kill yourself or kill your girlfriend. And that was a different book. Like, obviously, that didn't end up being this. But that was what it originated from. And then I don't plot anything in particular. Yeah. I just take that and then sit down and start writing and just see what happens and just had some fun.
And when you came up with that original plot, kill yourself or kill your girlfriend, was the girlfriend in that idea as absurd as Elaine?
Yeah. She was. That was all very similar. But that was a completely different book. And that was a book that was called How to End Elaine. It wasn't Sedating Elaine. Oh. It was completely different. But it just naturally evolved and grew and changed over several drafts until it became what it is now, which is the book that felt right to me. Yeah. You know, I had an ending where I pushed Elaine out of a window. And that was just fun. I don't know if other writers do this, but I'll just write a whole bunch of different endings just because they're fun. It's just like playing God, isn't it? You can do anything with these people. So I'll shove her out a window, off we go. And then it doesn't feel right. So bless her, I can't do that. So I go back and write a different one. And then when I wrote that ending, actually, it was the end of a day of writing where I'd been writing for about 7 hours, which is a really long time for me because I could kind of see that the end was in sight. And I sat down and I wrote that ending, and I remember writing it because I remember being tearful. And then my fiance came home and I was sitting there with tears in my eyes, and I was like, I've either written a tearjerker of an ending or I'm just really tired. But I knew like this is the ending for the book.
In general, do you when you nail it, can you feel it that you nailed it?
Yeah. And you know, sometimes it's horrible because you've written something that you really like but you haven't nailed it, and then that has to go. And I hate that feeling. Yeah. Like, I had this back and forth with my lovely agent several times about the Doctor.
I knew we were going to talk about the Doctor. Let's talk about the Doctor.
I love the Doctor. So the Doctor originally had about half the book, had his own plot line. His plot line was woven into Francis's plot line. The thing about the ring, like the engagement ring, that actually was the Doctor's wife's ring. There was a whole thing going on with the Doctor, and I really loved him, and I didn't want to have to get rid of him, but I was told that he was too he was distracting from the main plot, Francis's story. So I was like, oh, okay. So I took some of him out and changed it a bit and sent it back, and it was like, still too much Doctor. Take some more Doctor out and change things again until he ended up with what he's got, which I still really love my Doctor, actually.
I mean, it's an admittedly very funny conceit that, you know, her life is a total mess, and so she goes to see this doctor who ends up being like, but my life is a mess.
Yeah.
And so it's actually like a very funny setup that he's just such a disaster. But I just thought that was so funny that when I read the book with no knowledge of what had happened with you and Susan, I was like, this is so great. I think there's too much Doctor. And you were like, no. Because he'd already taken out like 90.
I know. Oh, my poor Doctor.
He should have his own book. He can have his own story.
Yeah, no, maybe one day he will.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's hard, isn't it? Because sometimes you just can't see, you can't read it as a reader's reading it, right? So I'm reading it just knowing what works for me and what I like, and that's not always going to be what readers want to read.
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes a bit tough. You know, you're having to be quite brutal with yourself and cut out these bits that actually you hold quite dear, or even if it's not working well in the book, and I can feel it's not working well in the book, but I just like the writing, or I've written something that I'm proud of, then I don't want to get rid of it.
Totally.
You know? Then
Killing a joke, it's the worst, yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing, giving feedback, saying, can you make this bit funnier? Oh, like it's that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could, if I would have, yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. But then, you know, I'd never been told that I was funny before, and I'd never tried to write anything that was comedy before. In fact, I didn't even know that this was a dark comedy when I sent it over.
Oh.
I wasn't quite sure what it was.
It's super funny.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you. It's super funny.
I'm really pleased to hear it, but no, I didn't know that. There was nothing that I wrote that made me laugh when I was writing it. I think apart from Elaine's yawn, I laughed at her yawn.
The yawn. Yeah.
But that was it.
Well, one of the things I think is just carrying on with the Doctor, I think it's funny that there are several male characters in here, Dom included, the Doctor included, and then also King, who are these like kind of tough, on the surface, bad guys who actually have sweet hearts and have very good intentions for Francis. I'm sorry, I'm going to read a little bit more. All right, this is King. So do you want to explain who King is?
So Francis works in a restaurant. She's a dishwasher, and King is her boss, effectively. He runs the kitchen and is like head of the kitchen porters and stuff.
King had been at the restaurant for decades, minus a few absences at Her Majesty's pleasure. He was a heavily tattooed bodybuilder who sang opera and gulped down egg whites from a huge bowl set aside for him by the chefs when the yolks were taken for creme brulees. He took his job seriously. No smear or smudge mark allowed, glasses gleamed, cutlery shone, and if a chef returned a plate with the teeniest remnant of cheese on it, King would bellow at his KP, "What the fuck you doing to me? You trying to make me crazy, yeah?" And glare with such fury they could only mumble, "Sorry, King," never entirely sure if he was serious or not. Unbelievable, that's what it is. Clean it again. Yes, King, sorry, King. No one knew what he had done time for. It seemed irrelevant. Despite the bulk and roar of him, he was not really an angry man. None of them were. Bellowing and slamming was just part of kitchen life. To be heard, to keep momentum, to push on through the continuous physical and mental focus that is a restaurant dinner service. So the restaurant is actually this like very happy, good place for Francis, in spite of how kind of rough and tumble it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever I worked in kitchens, they have this kind of camaraderie in them. Obviously, when she's working at the pot wash, there's a sense of she can lose herself in her job, and I definitely felt that when I was working there. And King is this kind of, he's like a great big teddy bear kind of character, isn't he? Mm-hmm. And he's like just head of that family, really. Mm-hmm. And actually, he's the only character in the book who is directly inspired by someone in real life. Which was someone that my fiance used to work with. And there was an evening when I was already writing the scenes in the kitchen, and then he started telling me about this guy that he used to work with in a kitchen. He used to sing opera and he used to drink egg whites and stuff like that. And there was I was just keep talking because this is absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, it was really easy then just to obviously weave that into the story because it's just a case of embellishing then. But yeah, I just feel like he's really vivid and clear. Yeah.
And Frances finds these sort of figures, whether it's the doctor or King, I'm not going to put Dom in this category, who are, father-ish figures, but none of them have their life together enough to actually help her. But their faith in her and desire to help her gets her something. It means something.
And I mean, with the doctor, there's that element of empathy between them, isn't it? It's kind of unspoken, but you can tell that they're looking at each other thinking, yeah, I'm a mess too.
Yeah. She feels seen by them, yeah.
Yeah, she does. And there's that thing of if only you could, there's always something in the way, if you could cross that barrier and actually have an honest conversation together, or just a hug, or whatever it is she says to the doctor about, just hit me or hug me, that kind of thing. That it's like if you had a connection with someone, then it would ease all of the heaviness and the strain that you're carrying around, but she just can't kind of quite get there. But then she can't quite get there with anybody.
No, because she really doesn't understand herself at all.
No, not really. She's just, she's just completely incapable of dealing with what she needs to deal with in order to be healed until right at the end of the book. Yeah. And then really that is the doctor who helps her, because he tells her about forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness. And that's what she remembers, I think Elaine Elaine tells her, I should probably know this, I think it's Elaine tells her, doesn't she, that it's, you got to remember about forgiveness and you got to heal yourself.
Yeah. I think there's so much interesting stuff going on with gender in this book too, though. I mean, we've been talking about all these male characters who are, I'm not going to call any of them mentors because they're all like disastrous humans, but her most functional relationships tend to be with men in this book, and she has, as you learn as the book goes on, she has some mom issues, and it's the women that she has kind of the hardest times communicating with in this book. And then also, I laugh because I think you kind of turned some gender stuff on its head. Like, I wanted to make sure we didn't skip Betty when we're talking about Dom and the goons. So will you explain quickly who Betty is? I know I'm jumping subjects here, but I can't skip Betty.
So Betty is who Dom threatens to send round if she doesn't pay off her debt, and she is notorious for having creative ways of extracting money and confessions from people. She does mean things with hair straighteners. I'll just maybe leave it at that.
And it's this amazing thing because you're reading a book where the drug dealer is like threatening true bodily harm, but it will all be at the hands of this like small deranged woman named Betty.
Yeah, who just comes around with her hair straighteners.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like a wonderful gender flip. I really appreciated that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Again, this is just my brain having fun.
Betty. The other character I just wanted to touch on, speaking of mommy issues and women, is Elaine's mother. So Elaine's mother is one of our favorite characters. And so late in the book, I'm not giving much away, Frances has successfully sedated Elaine, and Elaine is like in the bed all like loopy, and Frances is kind of trying to hide her there, figuring out like what she's going to do. And then there's a knock at the door.
A rat-tat-tat.
Yeah. So I'll very quickly read about Jennifer, and then we can talk a little bit about why we love to hate Jennifer. All right. Jennifer Langthorne wore the sort of heels proper ladies wear. Too high or too thin and you were common, too low or too fat and you were unfeminine. Hers were the type that click, click, clicked in a sharp, immaculate way, as if every step were to scold the dirty pavement. Her legs, two squat stumps, were certainly shapely, but disproportionately so, as if some stuffing from her breasts had slid down inside her body and deposited itself around the calves and ankles. She wore a blue dress, stretched tight across the hips, suffocating a blue and red striped blouse tucked in at the waist, where a red leather belt was attempting to hold back a tide of spillage. She opened the handbag and produced a tiny mirror, with which she proceeded to analyze her face as Frances watched on, her own face struggling to find and form the correct expression, whatever that might be. "Nice to meet you," she eventually said, and Mrs. Langthorne snapped the little object closed and placed it carefully back in her bag. "So, this is where my angel lives now, is it?" she said, looking around as if the hall were all that existed, like they curled up asleep at night on the doormat. I can't say I'm surprised. She's always been a bit wild and rebellious, and I've been telling Louis, Elaine's father, for years that one day she'll go roughing it. She was going to help the Africans, you know. That's what she's been saying for years. Personally, I'd rather she stayed here where she's safe. Well, when I say here, her words trailed off as her eyes looked fearfully at Frances's grubby shoes on newspaper by the front door. Clearly, she was wondering if Elaine should have gone to help Africa after all. Then she turned on her heel and marched in the direction of the living room, visibly curling her nose up against the smell, wafting her gloved hand in front of her face and clutching her bag even tighter against the likelihood of thieves and ruffians. That would be a mother-in-law.
Yeah, it would, right? I know. But, you know, it's so easy, I think, for me to have a laugh at people like that, because those are the people that I really do laugh at, because I think I'm so much more like on Frances's level, that if I had a mother-in-law, you'd have to see the funny side of her. If she was like that, you would have to be laughing at her, wouldn't you? Because she is so ridiculous. She's so offensive. And when people are that offensive and that rude, what can you do apart from laugh at them?
Is Frances a little bit intimidated by her?
I don't think so.
No, she just
Not
wants
really.
her out.
Yeah, just get lost. Get out of my flat. Take the hint.
But she knows better than to. She can sense the kind of power that a woman like that has, and so she's like afraid to just mess with her too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's quite a force to be reckoned with anyway, isn't she? Like, she doesn't really ask to come in. She just, you know, blusters her way in and then starts storming around the flat and then sweeping into the bedroom. And it's kind of like, what can you do when there's this whirlwind coming into your world, when you're also trying to hide your sedated girlfriend? So your head is kind of more in that direction, really. It's like, just do what you want, just don't go in the bedroom.
It's very tense. It's like a get out of the house, get her out of the house kind of scene. And she shows up more than once. It's a nice stressful interlude that you put in there.
And I don't know if people, if the reader really wants her, who are you rooting for? You've got to be rooting for Frances, right? So you don't want Jennifer to go in and find her drugged daughter, but then obviously her daughter is drugged, and it would be best for Elaine if she was discovered, if she was rescued and taken out of there, but you're still on Frances's side.
I mean, that's the big trick of the book, right? Is that you have us rooting for like a very terrible cause the entire time.
Keep her in the bed. Don't let me find out. I know.
You like make the writer culpable, the reader culpable in your scheme here.
You're welcome.
Well, just to take a step back, why is there a banana on the jacket?
Because when Adrienne gives her phone number to Frances, she has written it on a banana, and she drops it out of the window, and Frances catches it.
A romantic banana.
Yeah, it is. And actually, that came from the fact that when I was a kid, my mum used to write my name on my fruit before I went to school so no one would steal it. So now it's hilarious that my name is actually on a banana for all time.
That's so good.
I know.
I did some deep thinking on the symbolism of the banana. Are you ready for it?
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So first of all, sorry, I'm so immature, but I just have to think it's funny that we have a banana on the jacket and it's a lesbian love story. We're just gonna like acknowledge that that's funny. Here's what I was thinking. I was thinking that, okay, whenever people ask Frances how she and Adrienne met, she tells people, oh, we met over the bananas at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. But that's not true, is it, right?
No, I can't remember where they met.
Well, it's sort of how they met, but Frances...
Worrying, isn't it?
I'm going to tell you about your book. So Frances had seen Adrienne and started following her around.
Yes. Yeah, she was in this cafe and Adrienne came in and she thought, she reminds me of my mother. Because she was always looking for people that looked like her mother. Yeah. Even though she couldn't remember what her mother looked like, she had an image in her head of what she thought her mum would look like, and it was Adrienne. Yeah. Yeah.
So she starts creeping around and following Adrienne, and she's stalking her, and she figures out where she lives, and she stands outside her window, and yet whenever people, and then, you know, they finally have this chance encounter over the bananas, and then she, you know, romantically throws the banana out the window. But this is like this total false narrative that she builds up that, oh, we met over the bananas. and I'm like totally overthinking this, I like the symbolism of this false narrative because that is what Frances has built out for herself throughout the entire book. Every story she tells about herself and her life comes to be a lie. So I think...
Same with her mother, because
Yes.
she's convinced herself that her mother is dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think
power of the
I think
imagination.
the banana is like a next level jacket. I think go Knopf art department. That
Yeah,
is a
that
next
is.
level jacket there.
It really is. I remember seeing that actually for the first time and laughing out loud.
Did you?
Yeah, because people were asking me, like, what do you have in mind what the jacket's going to be? And I was like, well, I'm trying not to. You don't want to pin your ideas on anything at all. But I remember saying to someone, like, oh, I can imagine it being some really kind of artsy black and white, like scene, like looking up a pier or something like that, you know, like kind of dreamy or something. And then I opened that and I was like, oh, wow.
That is not what I
I got that
thought it
really
was gonna
wrong,
be.
but that's great.
I have so many more questions for you, so we're just going to rapid fire for a minute before we have to
Okay.
go to questions. Okay. I think you started to say this. How long did it take you to write this once you discovered this was the book you were going to write?
The first draft was 6 weeks.
Okay. Moving on.
Yeah, no, I'm stunned as well.
And then this question you already answered. Did you set out to write comic fiction? You don't even think it's funny. You think it's
I
pretty
didn't realize.
serious. No. All right. And then you've had a bunch of jobs. Which of those jobs like most helped you become a writer?
Oh, wow. None of them.
None.
They all gave me the time to write, which is what I really wanted. I didn't want to have like a full-blown career that didn't give me any time. And it's only now that I'm starting to realize, like, oh, actually, what they are is my material. You know, they're fodder now for my writing. At the time, it was just, oh, get me out of this factory so I can go home and write.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't think that I would be writing about anything that I had done job-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sedating Elaine has been optioned for television.
Mm-hmm.
What were those conversations like, and is that totally bizarre to think about? Or just exciting?
They're really, really surreal now because they only came like a week after the book deal. So the book went out on submission, and then like a week later I was talking to you, and then it was like a week or two later I was talking to producers in LA, which was so weird because I had just been this person who for 10 years had been basically writing in a box in this village in England, and then suddenly it's like, oh wow, what's happening? What's happening? And yeah, there was a week of that, and it was really, really strange, and I don't remember very much about them because I think I was just so dazed by the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun once I got into it. It was just overwhelming. For months afterwards, I just felt like I was in shock.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Now too, by the way.
What's it?
Now too, as well. I still feel like I'm
Right?
in shock. I know.
Which writers do you love?
Jean Rhys is my favorite writer of all time. I first read Jean Rhys when I was at uni, and I now have her books all over my house, and I just pick them up and read them wherever and whenever I can. She's the only author that I read all the time. Yeah, I think because they're usually about women who are bumbling around in messy lives, making their messy lives worse for themselves.
All right, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then I will save some questions for anybody here who has some, so you guys can start to let those ideas percolate. I think, maybe there's some virtuous person who doesn't, but I think that every writer has a bad writing habit, whether they like secretly smoke or drink tons of coffee or eat a lot of jelly beans or what is it? So what is your bad writing habit?
Oh, wow. Just one?
No, you can have a few.
Yeah. I write in bed. I've heard that that's really bad for you, especially since like lockdown, everyone who's working from home was being told not to write in bed because it's bad for your posture and it drives you crazy. And I can agree with both of those things. It does absolutely do that, but that's my safe space and my comfy place is being in bed writing. So yeah, I've tried writing at desks and stuff. It just doesn't work for me. It feels very forced.
Yeah.
Things all upright.
Like, I am a professional writer.
Yeah, that's exactly. I sit here and do my writing thing. I've tried loads of different places, actually. We have like a shed at the bottom of the garden that we converted into a writing room. Got it insulated, like spent a fortune making it really nice, and now it's just full of just stuff. And if we don't go down there, it might as well just be, it is a shed again, basically.
Before I open it up for questions, I just want to show you something. This is like so embarrassing. So just bear with me because I think it's so humorous.
This is the secret in the bag.
Yes,
that I don't know
this is the
about.
secret in the bag. All right. So I woke up at 4 a.m. one night and I had an idea, and I was like, I think I can like make a picture for Dawn that is going to make her really, really laugh. So I went into the kitchen and I got 2 bananas, and I hope you'll be able to see. I drew on them. So these are 2 bananas spooning in bed. And so this banana is like so happy and like has her arms all over this banana. She's happy. And this banana is like awake and sad, like does not want to be spooned. And then, in keeping with the book, I then went on Amazon and I bought all of these tiny bottles of alcohol. They're really, really little bottles of booze, like just like teeny tiny little booze bottles. So then I arranged them all around the bananas, and then I had like fake money behind Elaine, and then I had her like give her an aspirin. I took a bunch of pictures of this. I thought it was really funny. So in the morning, all my props are lying around, and my 6.5-year-old comes out and she's like, "Mommy, what are those little bottles?" And I said, "Oh, that's for Mommy's work." And she said, "Well, can I have some of them?" And I said, "Well, I really need them for my work." And she was like, "Okay, when are you going to be done with them?" "In a few days." So in a few days, she came back and said, "Mommy, are you done with the little bottles for work?" And I said, "Sure." So now her dollhouse is full of booze bottles and little
brilliant.
It's just this like tiny, degenerate little dollhouse.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So anyway.
Like a little drinking den.
Yeah, totally.
Also, I need those for my work, but they're a different size.
They're tiny little nips. You can have some on the plane.
Thanks.
All right, that's it from us.
I love that. Thank you.
So on that fantastic note, we're going to shift to an audience Q&A. Grace is going to bring our microphone to the middle, and we welcome anyone to just go right up to the microphone and then make a line up the aisle. And to our Zoom audience, you can just put your questions in the Q&A on the Zoom.
I know the first question is so intimidating.
Be nice.
I'll start since I have read the book, and I do have a question. So one of the things that you haven't talked about is one of the reasons why Frances is so a mess, and that's sort of maybe you don't want to give away spoilers, but grief is a big part of the book as well. And I wondered if you could talk about how you managed to make a story about grief so funny.
I think, well, again, like I said, because there was no agenda when I was writing it, I wasn't really thinking like that. My writing is always erred on the dark side anyway, so it was perfectly normal for me to be writing about that kind of subject. I just kind of realized that comedy kind of makes it more palatable, and it's kind of a bridge in with people so that you can discuss that as a topic, because it's still uncomfortable, right? We don't like to think about it and we don't like to talk about it. But if you can make people laugh, if you have that comic relief there, then it's much easier. It softens it.
Didn't know that was going to happen. So one of my favorite parts of the book is how much Frances loves soup. And when I was reading it, I started making a lot of soup. And I was wondering if you have a soup that you, like, where that came from exactly, like what the inspiration for that was.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do really love cooking. And we always like joke in the house that everything I make is in one pot. So obviously like soup would be one of those things. And there's just something homely and comforting about it, isn't it? It's kind of one of those grounding foods. In terms of a favorite soup, well, yeah, I eat everything anyway. Anything spicy, I suppose. Spicy soups, they're good. I should have got that in there as well, shouldn't I? A bit more spice. If it wasn't spicy enough.
Well, I think we should get on to the part where everybody goes and buys your copy of the book so that you can read it. As you've all heard, so much to love about this novel. So we're going to move you on over to the bookstore, and Dom will be over there to personalize copies of the books. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, too, for a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.